question.
I thank the Speaker. Mr. Speaker, throughout history, there have been many examples of states that were openly targeted by rising enemies, but which failed to take effective action to prevent a potential threat from becoming a mortal one. This is at the crux of today's debate. The Congress will be sending to the President a long list of sanctions for him to implement. If all are implemented vigorously, this legislation could constitute decisive action to compel the Iranian regime to end its nuclear weapons pursuit, to end its chemical and biological weapons and missile programs, to end its state sponsorship of global jihadists, and in so doing, cease being a significant threat to our nation, to our interests, and to our important critical allies such as the Democratic Jewish State of Israel. If, as successive U.S. administrations have done, the sanctions are ignored, then we will have failed the American people. The Iranian regime has been constructing the means to make nuclear weapons, along with the missiles with which to strike other countries, for decades. 15 years ago, the U.S. took the lead to stop Iran. The U.S. demonstrated its commitment by withdrawing from commercial activities involving this rogue state. Congress then enacted the Iran Sanctions Act, hoping to use it as leverage for cooperation from our allies in preventing the Iranian threat from escalating. The 1996 law sought consultations first, but called for the imposition of sanctions unless allied governments had, and I quote, taken specific and effective actions, including as appropriate, the imposition of penalties to terminate the involvement, end quote, of their nationals in the sanctionable activity. But as the Iranian threat has grown, our allies have taken very limited steps regarding Iran. The international community has merely supported tepid UN Security Council resolutions that impose modest sanctions on the regime while restating the willingness to engage in negotiations and offer concessions to Tehran. Some countries have actively opposed placing any punitive measures on the Iranian regime, despite the fact that its violations of its international obligations have been repeatedly demonstrated by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Russia and China in particular have acted as surrogates for Iran and have watered down every action. The regime in Tehran has reason to be grateful for their efforts and their tireless work on their behalf. How sad. Now the U.S. has chosen to reward the likes of Russia by removing sanctions on entities assisting the Iranian nuclear missile programs and offering the Russian Federation a nuclear cooperation agreement on the same day that the Russian president offered the same nuclear deal to the Syrian regime. We are at a defining moment, Mr. Speaker. The opportunity we have before us in the form of this conference report may well prove to be one of our last best hopes to force Iran to end its nuclear weapons program and its policies that threaten our security. When appointed as a conferee for this bill, my goal was for the final product to have a comprehensive, crippling sanction policy targeting the Iranian regime. In principle, this conference report is a step forward. It expands the types of sanctions and the range of actors and activities to be sanctioned in an effort to strike at the Iranian regime's key vulnerabilities, especially its dependence on refined petroleum. The most important are a set of financial measures that, if implemented, would force foreign financial institutions to choose between doing business with Iran or with us in the United States. It also increases penalties on violators. Unfortunately, this act also contains a key element that could significantly undercut its effectiveness: multiple exceptions and waivers for the President and the executive branch officials. That means that by a stroke of a pen, substantive provisions can be transformed into mere recommendations or options. We must not allow this to happen. Mr. Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Kirk,